Welcome to today's episode. I'm Lindsay Francis, and this is Rich, Simple Human. Today, I'm sitting down with Nick Wooters, and this is a really important conversation if you're wearing a Whoop or a ring or have any interest in biometric data and understanding how you can perform better. Whether you're an athlete, somebody who's studying for exams, or an executive, remember leaders cast shadows. And we all have a responsibility to make sure that we're operating in the best way possible. The beauty about this conversation is we talk about why you might be interested in seeing some of this biometric data and how Nick and his organisation, Coya Life, help you to become far more effective at what you do. Ultimately, of course, being a human being and not a human doing. Now, this is no mean feat to explain how Nick and his business works. And he and I both share a passion for helping people understand what's going on so they can improve it. Of course, awareness is curative, but the education piece around these data trackers is also incredibly important. And it's sometimes not helpful to have a tracker on and not really understand what you're looking at. So we dive into what you should pay attention to and how it can benefit you. Nick is not only a performance coach and founder of Coya Life, but also a Stanford University lecturer. So he has a wealth of knowledge that's well worth listening to. Of course, if you'd like to find out more, please go to Nick's website, which is linked in the show notes. And if you would like your own sophrology toolkit for life, please get in touch. You can find me on LinkedIn, Lindsay Francis, and of course at lindsayfrancis.co.uk. I hope you'll enjoy the show, and I really hope that you will listen until the end, because we talk about some really fascinating and interesting ways in which we've seen people's lives totally transformed by using some of this data. Of course, it's important to say as well that the health benefits of looking after these pieces of your body are unimaginably important. And if you are suffering from a health condition, fatigue, or you're just running out of energy, I think we might be able to find the answer when we look into some of this information. Enjoy the show, and please leave us a review or follow us on whichever platform you're listening on. And I really look forward to you tuning in again soon. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Lindsay Francis, and today I'm sitting down with Nick. Nick is the founder of Coya Life and so much more. But before I do him a disservice by talking about him whilst he's listening, Nick, I absolutely love your work on performance, behaviour, and most importantly, biometric data, because I am too obsessed with it. And I'm also really keen to become part of the next Coya cohort to try and sort my own data out for various reasons. So, Nick, would you mind telling me a little bit about how you founded Coya Life and how your work with wearable health trackers, etc., creates behaviour change?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me. I'm really excited and looking forward to this conversation every time I get a chance to sit down. Particularly with you. I know we're gonna have a good chat, so I'm looking forward to it. I came at this really formulated during my time at Stanford University in Palo Alto, where I was a professor in the Stanford School of Medicine Health and Human Performance Department. While I was teaching, I was also working with the triathlon team. So it was a little bit of a mix of an academic and an athletic background. And I saw firsthand really the culture on that campus, which was one of, if you're not doing work until 4 a.m, you're probably getting left behind and you're doing it wrong. And more. And everybody is in 14 clubs and taking all of these classes. And it never quite sat right with me, mostly from my own athletic background. I competed as a swimmer through my college university days, and I knew that from my time in my athletic career that there was only so much work that got done, and the recovery aspect of it was really so critically important. After college, I got right into coaching on the swim side, and I found that it was very rare that I would have athletes that were overtrained. It was very common for me to see athletes who were under-recovered. And so it was really that mindset that I started seeing what was happening on the Stanford campus, and I wanted to do some education around how do we best understand when to push and when not to, and what's actually going on inside of our bodies. And so fortunate timing wise in the world, as sometimes that happens, the wearable market was really starting to push and explode, and devices like the Oura ring and the Whoop strap and even Garmin devices were really starting to come into prominence as an option for the everyday person to learn more about their biometrics and what was going on inside their body. And so utilizing those tools and bringing them both on campus as well as with other people that I worked with on the side, and trying to help them understand what was going on inside their body. And I would say that the first thing that I realized was that the device as a standalone, it was tricky to manage. It was tricky to manage. You know, there were certainly some people who learned a lot just by looking at it, but I would say a vast majority either wasn't sure what they were looking at or how to digest it, how much should they take it in. And so my focus really turned to the education that needs to come alongside when you're starting to look at your own health data. And I would say that was really the impetus of starting to build Coya, and what I thought was really important as these devices grew and we're going to be, in my opinion, ubiquitous. I think people are going to be wearing things that are collecting health data, whether they know it or don't, or utilize it or know it or whatever. But I think they're probably going to be everywhere if I'm reading the tea leaves. But what to do with it and how to digest it, that was really became my passion and focus.
And then how did you get from there to founding this absolutely brilliant company that I'm super excited to be engaging with?
Yeah, we're excited to have you. And I think it was I was really fortunate to cross paths with my co-founder Jason Muir, who actually was a tech startup founder already, and so he had that very well dialed in from his experience, and as we came together, we both ex-coaches, so we had that in our blood, and we started to think about and realize we could use this biometric data as a way to really expand coaching, and utilize data that was collected passively. And so what we did was first went into the athletic market in the States with Division I athletes, pro teams, etc., and got devices to those athletes and provided some education around that data. And so the talk track there was almost, when you're in facility, there's a coach and there's technology and there's a plan and they're developing you in your athletic endeavors. And then you leave the facility and you might be out of the facility 18, 20 hours of the day. All the decisions that you're making and how you're navigating life in those areas are going to drastically impact how you show up back in facility to train again. And so here's a tool to help you navigate that so that you can come back as your best self to then take your training to the next level. And it went really well. The athletes that we work with, they were really hungry for something like this, not just because of the athletic benefit, but also the pressures that they were under academically. You know, they in the States in particular, they just have so much on their plate. They're traveling for their sport. They're trying to compete. They're obviously trying to win. They also have to perform in the classroom. They're also at an age where they're trying to figure out who they are. And there's just a lot going on, and all of that, particularly obviously in the age of social media, and there's just pressure. There's pressure that they're not equipped, in my opinion, to handle with the traditional kind of like upbringing that they got there. And so it was a really good match and a really good fit. And then probably about, I want to say maybe almost like 3 years ago or so, we started to get a little inbound from executives looking for actually that similar type support. They were looking for performance in the boardroom, as well as I was hearing this growing sense of longevity, a combination of longevity in work as well as a longevity in life. And so what we did is we took the infrastructure that we had built in athletics and transferred it over to an individual place for executives and leaders to come through and understand their own body and how to lead better. And so what that actually looks like is about a 12-week cohort program. We figure out what wearable makes sense for them. Mostly it's which one are they going to keep on. And so we can get them, Oura ring, a Whoop strap, etc., a Garmin device. And then we take them through an education cohort together as a group where they're going to learn about HRV. They're going to learn about sleep, nutrition, hydration, immune function, self-care, mindset, all of these different areas. After they learn about it as a group session, they're going to get one-on-one support with a specialist. So that was really what we took from athletics. These athletic teams have strength and conditioning coaches and nutritionists and mental performance coaches. And the average person is, in my opinion, is a corporate athlete, they don't have that same sort of support system. And so we provide that for them, all tied back to their biometric data. So the data becomes a really helpful feedback loop of, when I make these changes, I can see that this is actually good for my body. It's not just good in theory or good on an internet or good on a podcast. Like, this actually is, my body is responding well to it. I feel more energy, but I can also see inside of me that my body's responding. And once we did that, things kind of exploded for us, as far as people really almost thirsty and hungry for this. The amount of people that come to us with, I just don't have any energy, or I'm sleeping terribly and I can't turn my brain off, or I can't shake the stress that I have day in and day out in all areas of my life. And we hope to provide roadmaps for people to understand specifically for them what's the right thing for them to do, to continue to show up as their best self.
People are quite desperate, and I see a similar situation where people come and sort of say, I don't really know what's wrong with me. And of course, there's the medical option. We can prescribe medication. People can start going to talk therapy. But when you see the biometric data, not only does it give you clues, but as they say, awareness is curative sometimes. You begin to see the information, and people say, oh, actually, I'm not sleeping the way I thought I was, or look how high my stress scores are, or they're beginning to get a bit more of a sense that the dashboard in their body is available to them. Perhaps they've turned it off, and they're not really looking.
100%. It's funny, if I just take nutrition as an example. It's so often that when we have everybody meet with the nutritionist, and sort of like come up with their plan, what we do is we say, okay, take the next week and let's actually just write down what are you eating? And almost inevitably every time when they meet with a nutritionist, they're like, I didn't like, I'm grabbing chips every day and I didn't know. I just didn't have a sense of it, right? And sleep's the exact same way. Like, no, I'm going to bed, like, I'm sleeping 8 hours a night. And then they look at it and like, well, actually, I'm in bed 6.5, and I'm actually only sleeping for 4.5 because I'm on my phone for a little bit and I'm waking up, and all of that is difficult to really perceive until you see the data, and all of a sudden, what gets measured gets improved.
Of course, what gets measured is so important. Nick, you and I talked about the education piece, because I put Whoop bands particularly and Oura rings on all my clients, and I also have my entire family, teenagers and elderly parents, wearing these devices. Now, the data wasn't built necessarily for all of those age groups, but the awareness in itself is very interesting, but there is an education piece missing here. And I see that a lot with people I see in the street, or I talked about, how's that device going for you? As of course you do, whenever you see somebody wearing a Whoop or Oura, I would ask about it. Tell me, in a nutshell, why is the education piece so important?
Yeah, I think that the devices honestly are so good at collecting a whole bunch of things that it sort of ends up almost being paralysis of so much, right? And what does it all mean? And which one of these is the most important thing to think about? And where do I aim with all of this? And I think the devices they're getting better and better at, I would say, coming off the shelf. They're getting better and better at people being attracted to them and understanding, like, oh, this is great. I think what happens after, let's say, a month or two is I get a lot of times people looking around saying, like, okay, now what do I do with this? Like, this is great that this is telling me something, but am I trying to make this better? Am I just taking this in? And a lot of times I think people digest this and say, I don't want that device because I know, like, I'm not sleeping well, or like life is stress. I don't need a reminder of it. I know that very well, right? And I think then all of a sudden I realize that they're missing the best usage and the purpose of it. I describe it as a dark room, and if I can get more lights on in the room, I'm going to be able to see things more clearly. And I think the devices does a really good job of turning lights on of what's going on actually inside of your body, so that then okay, I might lean this way or that way today. And I think the education is not really intended to have everybody operating as robots when this is all over and everybody's doing the same thing. But rather, do I know what I'm deciding between? Right? Do I know what I'm deciding between? And then alcohol is a perfect example of this. I think as a founder of a health company, it's certainly not something that I should prescribe, right? I think that there's very little evidence that says that it's really going to make you a much healthier person. Now, I have seen many instances where somebody gets to be with a friend they haven't seen for a long time, and they share a glass of wine and they get to sit around or they're going camping and they're around a campfire. I, I also see that there's health benefits to that, right? And I think those health benefits to that, that's not the same decision as it's Tuesday and today was a hard day at work. And so I think, right, do you know what you're deciding between the pros and cons of it to then decide whatever you'd like to decide? But do you know what you're deciding between? I think that's really, if you can provide the education around the device, then all of a sudden the device just fits into the right lane in your life where this is just giving me some feedback of the habits that I'm doing. And so that I know then where I sit. For me, I have work travel this week. I'm going to be flying tomorrow. And so I know for me, I'm just a little bit more diligent yesterday and today on my hydration intake, on what I'm eating. Um, I'm not somebody who drinks regularly, I'm not a no drink person, but I'm not going to have anything the next couple of days. Like if I just do those things, I know with travel, I'm considerably less likely to get sick. And I'm traveling for work and I'm going to show up and have to present to an audience. I owe it to them as well as to myself to make sure that I'm showing up as the best version of myself, right?
And it's just that planning in your head and actually having a coach that can say, you're about to do this trip. Have you built in the prep time? And have you also built in the recovery time? Because I'm back from a trip, a very long journey back from Japan. I didn't build in any recovery time on the return, and I'm still suffering a month later. And the older you get, my clients are always over 40, if not over 45 and closer to 50. The older you get, the harder it is to pull those stunts that you could get away with when you were 35.
100%. And I think it gives people almost a false sense of security that, right, if they're like, well, and if I look back to history, I checked this trip over here and it was totally fine. And it was like, okay, but first off, that was 10 years ago. And second off, perhaps you know more now, right? You know more now. And it takes a little bit longer to come back. And again, I always think about it a little bit in terms of the people that I interact with, like be that my family. When I return from this trip, my three children and my wife, like they don't deserve a lesser version of me because I didn't plan that in, and I've been away, so I want to make sure I'm showing up for them in the best way possible. And I think that most of the time I find I'm actually able to perform considerably better when I know that those guardrails are in place. Like I'm able to lean in harder. And so, a lot of the entrepreneurs we work with, they're like, this is just the nature of right now is that I need to grind because this is just the season of life I'm in. And my response to them is, it's not about going on vacation once a week or unplugging entirely. Like you're more than welcome to charge away and do all your work and do that whatever time of whatever, however you want to navigate that. But if you actually want to be very, very productive in doing that, and if you want to be very, very efficient in doing that, then your system needs to be operating at a very high level. I mean, that's just the truth of it. And so it's that pause and pull back so that you can slingshot forward that I think people need to wrap their minds around.
Yeah, and that is a very bespoke conversation sometimes. And that recovery piece, I was having a very interesting conversation about founders. If you're putting yourself out there as somebody who's investable in, you have got a duty of care to make sure that you're not going to be burnt out within 5 years. And people should disagree with me. Oh no, Lindsay, I'm just going to push and I'm going to grind. But it doesn't work that way. You've got to do the recovery piece to ensure that you have got some sort of backup plan or at least some buffer in your business before you end up almost not being able to perform at all.
Yeah. People always get upset at me. Because I always just say, just Google it. Just Google it. Find me where that's a good idea. Find me where that's a good idea. And I will concede. But we got our start in athletics. And so in the States, looking at like the preeminent athletes in let's say football and basketball, be that Tom Brady, the quarterback, or LeBron James in basketball, they're playing at a peak of their career so much later in their life than ever before. And it's not because they're training harder. It's not because they're doing more in the gym. It's because they're doing more when they leave, right? They have more resources around like recovery and cryo chambers and masseuses and dietitians and chefs that are making the food. Like they've put their focus there, and we're seeing them then sustain what they're doing physically and cognitively for much, much longer. And so if I take that into the workforce, if I'm building a company, I certainly don't want that career to be over in 3-4 years. I need that to be longer than that. And so if I just look around at what the best are doing, that's where the investment is. The investment in time, money, resources, focus is on the recovery so that you can then keep doing what you're doing over and over and over again.
Of course, sometimes you do have to be still, slow down and stop to do the recovery. And that's the bit where I see people fight me because they say I simply don't have time. And my point is, you don't not have time. You can't take that risk. It's so high to keep pushing and keep going.
Yeah, especially in this day and age. I think about reception versus reflection. In the way that we live in our world right now, we are on reception 24/7. If you are if you're waiting in line to check out, you're going to pop on your phone. If I'm in my car, I'm going to have a podcast on. If I'm like, there is just no reflection time, and our bodies were not built to operate that way. We cannot be on intake without processing. And so the only time that we are not on reception is when we lie our head on the pillow. And that is about the worst time, which now I'm going to sort through my entire day and all the stresses that I have. And then people come back and say, why I'm not sleeping well. Well, no kidding, right? You're putting an incredibly important job for your body and your brain to do, and you're asking it to do it when you don't want it to be doing any of that. But that's the only opportunity you've given it to do that reflection piece. To how do I sort through all that, right? And so I think the options then clearly become, am I going to schedule blocks of time in order to do that, in order to be still, to sit with just like, what am I actually feeling? What am I thinking? What's coming up? And I've seen people do that in even micro breaks. I don't need to sit for an hour, but can I have 5 minutes here and there? Can I have 5 minutes before a meeting, after a meeting, and be able to help do that? And again, the data becomes really, really helpful in that. Doing a breath work, sitting, doing a meditation, just having a moment for yourself and looking at your biometric data and saying, man, I'm really much calmer now than I was before. And then I go into a meeting and I'm actually like, I'm able to have a conversation on a different level. Like, we're sorting through these problems a lot easier. People start to see that and feel that.
And I think from a spiritual perspective, it's where we talk about the shift from intelligence to insight. You go into a meeting having done a 3 minute, whatever you've done, whether you've done a mindfulness practice, a sophrology practice, they're normally 3 minutes, you've done some meditation or breath work, but you're able to access your intuition. You're not running on this brain power. You're on the deeper self. So of course you're going to get so much more done because you're using all of your resources that you've spent years and years acquiring and building. That for me is a magic moment.
100%, 100%. And it's like most people got to where they got to because of their ability to do that. And as they get to where they get to stay where they are, a bunch of stuff clouds and gets in the way. And so how do we almost teach them to get back to like, what is your superpower? Like, what is your strength? And it's you as a human. And so how do we get connected to that in order to be able to have that in the moments we really need it, which is moments of confrontation or moments of difficult decision making or conversations, or as you're navigating kind of the difficulties of life. And I think that certainly pausing is a non-negotiable for me.
I love the words you use, Nick, reception or reflection, because we're receiving more data now as human beings than we ever have done in the history of man. And it's coming at us from all angles. And even if you do put your phone away, invariably there's something else that appears. It's so important that we have that time. Can I ask you, as a human being, and I always say be a human being and not a human doing, what's your favorite thing? If I say, what's your favorite sort of reflective practice to do, or what do you enjoy doing most?
Yeah, I would say that there's two things. One is, as a personal thing, I have a sense of almost rotating things out. So I like to try different things. I think that I find that I'm in a different place as a person, and as I continue to evolve, I maybe lean one way or the other at different times. Um, I last year, I would say, I was doing breath work very, very regularly, and it was something that I really got into. I wasn't very, I would say, knowledgeable or good at it or any of those sort of things, right? And so that became interesting
Oh,
to me.
you definitely know what you're doing. You're breathing. It looks fine.
Yeah, yes. I suppose the bar might be lower. Um, but I've been finding lately, just stillness has been very, 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 very good for me lately. And so finding time and opportunity to just be still and quiet and see what's going on in there and see what comes up. So I will say that I have some situational things as well. Um, I'll give you an example. When I come back home to my house, if I've been out, if my family is inside, I will do 30 seconds of breathing in the car before I get out. And I don't want whatever I'm taking with me throughout my day, I don't want to show up that with for my kids. And so I try to do that on a regular one. I've seen that's been very, very helpful for me. Um, it started out with I have a seatbelt click rule. If I hear the seatbelt click, I do 2 very slow deep breaths. Um, and I have found I drive a little bit calmer. I don't need wherever I'm going, I might be, hopefully not running too late, but I'm going somewhere. I find that my drive is a little bit easier, and then whatever from a traffic or whatever's happened on the road wherever I'm going, when I take the seatbelt off and it makes the click, that same thing, I don't need to bring that in to where I'm going, right? And so that was like a really simple thing that started for me, that I try to share with as many people as I can, because it probably takes me 6 seconds and it makes a world of difference for me.
I love that. I'm going to steal that, because we have an anchoring exercise in sophrology where you find an anchor, and actually the seatbelt click that you're using as your anchor would be perfect for so
Yep.
many. Not if they're traveling on the tube in London, that won't work. But for the vehicle, that would be perfect. And I use a glass of water, and I also use the shower. So I use it as a bit of a gratitude practice. We have amazing water where I live. I don't know about where you are, but the water that comes out the tap is phenomenal. And also the water, I have lots of hot water in my house. I was very lucky and put a new boiler system in. Well done us. But being really grateful for that every day. And every time you have a glass of water, you just think, gosh, you make it a practice.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it becomes quite, well, it's actually transformative. Of course, it changes over time as you learn to meditate more. Can I ask you, Nick, about HRV? Because I have lots of people who come to me, especially if they are in the Ironman tribe, of which there are many close to where I am. If they've got a low HRV and they say, "Oh, I've got this Whoop band or Oura ring, whatever, a Morpheus, and I've got a low HRV, but I'm absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with me. This is a nonsense." HRV is not a measure of athletic performance. It is a measure of autonomic nervous system. Can you just explain it a bit to people who don't know what the data is or what they're looking at?
Yeah, fantastic question. And it's like, it is absolutely central to the starting point of what we do for our journey is let's get on the same page of what it is we are talking about, because without it, we're going to be in some trouble here soon. And I would say this, my description of heart rate variability is it's the body's way of communicating how it's adapting to stress or strain. And so by doing that is 2 things. One is, if it's a form of communication, it can't be good, bad. It's not measured that way. It's just communicating, right? It is what it is. And the second thing is, it's how it's adapting to stress or strain, not specific to physical, mental, emotional, spiritual stress. It's just stress on the body. Mm-hmm. And so if this is just an insight into how your body is adapting to the stress that's on your plate, right? So an oversimplification would be, how are you doing? Give me a number for how you're doing, right? But I think that the reality is around HRV is most of the time people are associating that incorrectly with something having to do with something physical. And I think it's much more holistic than that, number one. Number two, it's gathered nocturnally when it's effectively done, right? And I think that's the other problem with the PR department for HRV is it has to swim upstream a little bit against, well, HRV taken during the day isn't very effective at all, of which I would 100% agree with, because it's affected by so many things. If I walk across the room, my HRV is going to be different. If I have a sip of coffee, my HRV is going to be different. And so to use it during the day as an active measurement, it becomes very ineffective. However, nocturnally, when I'm routinely in a similar state of relaxation, perhaps in my deepest state of relaxation, then that becomes very, very helpful for, how is my body actually settling right now? How has it gone through all the checklists of the things it needs to do versus it's really dealing with something. And so certainly an extreme example of that would be illness. If my body is sick and I'm sleeping, I'm still going to be fighting that illness. I'm still going to be, there's a lot on the to-do list for my body, even though I'm sleeping to get done, right? And so you're going to see that affect HRV and lower that number. But I think that understanding that, number one, I love these devices. I'm wearing too many of them at once, and we built a business around them, so I'm disproportionately love them. But they are a tool, not the rule, and that is something that I think that they are a very helpful tool. But the tool is to get you connected with your body, not to give you the answers. And so if the tool can be used to, oh, when I feel that, this is sort of what that means. I think that so often in our program we hear people say, I felt like that before. I didn't know what that was, or like, or I felt this way or that way. If we can get people to be able to hear their body a little bit more clearly, they're going to be able to understand how to transition and what the things that they can do, this or that, in a variety of these different areas across their body to make things better. HRV is very, very helpful for that because it is that communication. It's how the body is going to really communicate with you, how it's dealing with the stress or strain that's on its plate.
We are seeing, and that was a brilliant explanation. I super appreciate it because you're far more knowledgeable in this area than I am. But we are also seeing quite a lot of new data around peer-reviewed studies where HRV is being linked to anxiety or certain disorders. And I think that's quite interesting when we realize how powerful, it's only been, I think, around since the 1960s as a measure. But we're beginning to see this evidence of if an HRV is very, very low, it is pointing towards other issues that we might not have seen already in the body. And clients sometimes say to me, "Oh, the data's wrong. I feel absolutely fine." And my response is often, "I don't think so. I just don't think you can feel it."
I 100% agree with you, and I think that the data is wrong, which I have heard as well. To me, always makes me a little bit laugh because, in my opinion, it can't be right or wrong, right? It's a trend line that it's going on, and so like all the time, I always get like, well, what's a good HRV? And
Yes.
people get very upset with me when I say I have no idea. I have no idea. Like, well, where are you trending? Where have we been for the last couple of months, and where are we going? I think that's the beauty of the devices is if people are going to nitpick on, let's say, the accuracy of, well, this is, not as accurate as this or that, or I concede all of that. That's great. I have no problem with all of it. I can still get a sense of the direction I'm heading if I step back and say, oh man, over the last couple months, work has really been weighing on me, and I can see where that's going, right? And it doesn't matter to me if my HRV is 76, but it should be 78. Like that's irrelevant to me if I can see the overall trend line. And so when people tell me that they think the data is incorrect, my response to them is, well, it's irrelevant. Could it be better?
Yeah.
What do we do to make it better? That's the only thing that matters to me is, what do we do to make it better, and what's causing it to go down? And if we can just pinpoint that, then we're going to be using it really, in my opinion, in the most powerful way.
And for any listener who's now just gone into their device to check if their Whoop score is about 67, because Nick just gave you away, I urge you not to. I urge you to check what was it like in the last month, 6 months. Look at your trends, because I've just looked at mine and actually it was horrifying. So there's a bit of a wake-up call. I also see, bearing in mind, I've seen Whoop bands on people from the age of 12 to the age of 78, and they're people I know closely and monitor their stats. The data is wildly different, and you have to also accommodate some of the nuances as people get older, especially if people are taking medication for their heart. You'll see very different data, and I see figures as low as 3 HRV, and I have a teen who has over 200. It's just personal. What worries me is when the data is changing, and why is it changing?
That's exactly right. I try to describe it as a fingerprint, and so there is no comparing person to person when it comes to HRV. It is a you versus you journey, and so I think I totally am in agreement with you. I think the anomalies, the outliers, and the peaks and valleys, they become helpful. Where are they? Why are they showing up? How far apart are they? Those sort of things where when I'm looking at that graph, that's really what sort of jumps out at me. Where are there commonalities and where are there anomalies? And then we sort of piece together of it. And a little bit is also that sort of becomes the fun of it, right? That becomes the gamification and the science experiments that exist of trying to diagnose something like HRV. And for us on a coaching platform, it becomes most effective when we remain the sous chef, when the person who's actually living the life is the one, sleeves rolled up, let me try to figure this out. And so it's really important metric to get somebody to that point where they're going to be willing to do some digging in order to help figure that out. And I think that in nowadays in times we're really in the mood for immediate response and immediate results and immediate answers and all that sort of stuff. And sometimes that's why people turn to even these devices. Like just tell me what to do. Just tell me where it goes, right?
Is the tablet? Is there something I can buy for this, Lindsay? Shall I take supplements? What shall I do? I think, can we just stop and see where we are first of all? I think personal agency is a really interesting point here. And one of my questions is, people do seem to treat wellness as a bit of a set of tasks. And you very clearly have worked extensively in the field of embodying wellness. And I'm now part of a cohort of people who are being called medical futurists, where we talk about well-being as a whole. It's not just about the medical solution. What's the biggest challenge to people knowing that they can make a decision themselves and make a change, do you think?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question. I would say for us, one way that we've attacked that is, as you're going to see coming through our program, the very first thing that we start with before we get to any piece of data or any piece of education about anything is we have people sit with their why and their purpose. And I think for things to be sustainable, we've got to be very, very clear. And a lot of times I find people haven't even really put in the time to sit with that and come up with that. It's not a black or white answer. It's not you decide one time and that's what it is. It's a snapshot in a moment in time with where you are. And I'll give you my example is for myself. If I need to go to the gym and I want to go work out and I'm doing so because I want to look a certain way, or there's going to be plenty of opportunity when it's cold outside and it's early, and that's not going to hold up against that, and I'm going to find myself not doing that. For me, I'm deeply passionate about being absolutely the best father that I can be. It's something that means a lot to me, and with my 3 children, and if I'm able to then think about that in terms of getting some fitness in so that I can embody and model what I'd like for my children to value, so that I can show up for them, so that I'm willing to get on the floor and wrestle and play and go outside and climb trees and do all the things that they want to do. That's going to hold up a lot more when things become tough. And so I think people getting a hold of, I'm actually holding the steering wheel of this entire experience. If they can understand what they're steering toward, it becomes the first step in that process.
And I don't like steering people towards frightening things, but there is enough evidence out there that says Alzheimer's and dementia is very closely linked to a lot of this data, and especially sleep and HRV. And that isn't something we would wish upon anybody. And we know that there's a huge rising occurrence of many illnesses we would like to avoid. It is that personal agency. You have the choice here. And I hear a lot of people say, well, I just have to do these things. And when you sort of explore and unpack that, they begin to realize that they can make their own choices and they can actually change how they feel. Because people almost think they can't choose how they feel. It's just being done to them and they're stuck.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that a lot of times what helps, I find, is that because people are thinking about something that's so daunting, it's so overwhelming to think, oh, I look at this person on the internet or social media or whatever, like this is my goal. Like I'm gonna have to change everything if I'm gonna like this, that I that's them and this is me, and like that can't be done. And I think what people start to realize is you can have the exact same day and the exact same schedule that you had already. There's moments in there where that are already fine that you're just not taking advantage of, right? And so for me, there are certainly times and situations and people where we need to move big boulders and we need to attack them with with conviction, and there's a timetable that we really need to work on this. But I would say that for every person listening to this and every person, period, across the country and across the world, like I think that there are tiny tweaks that are incredibly insignificant standalone, but all compiled together, you can really move the needle by doing very, very small things. Taking a couple deep breaths when you put on your seatbelt. Like I think that there are every time you go to eat lunch, like there's a choice there. There's a choice there, and like what you choose to have for a drink, there's a choice there. There are these choices everywhere, and there are plenty of companies and businesses that do a very good job of making the easiest one, maybe not the one that you should lean toward, right? But it doesn't mean that it's not a choice. And so, how do we set up systems so that the choice actually becomes easy for you to do the one that you want to make? And so, for us, that's what this is a lot about. It's a lot about systems over goals. I think goals are fantastic. I think how we get there is by creating the framework that just makes those decisions a little bit easier. And all of that allows for people to really take control over their life in a very meaningful way. That just because they just made their life, they stopped getting in their own way. Like they just don't just grab what's on sale. Like yeah, like just what is the right thing? What do you actually want to put into your body, right?
And I think you've got to slow down to speed up. You can't park the car at 100 miles an hour. You've got to slow back down to see, well, what choices have you got here? Oh, I'm too busy. I'm too busy. Well, you've actually got a choice in the morning. Do you want to get up and have a shower in the morning, or do you want to have a shower in the evening, or do you want to glass of water before you have a coffee, or do you want a hot water or a cold water? Like if we go right back down to tiny decisions, we can scaffold, we can habit stack in a way that becomes so much more effective. Um, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because there's so many things we just don't think about. We're on autopilot, subconscious behavior all the time.
All the time, all the time, all the time, and those stack up so quickly, and then all of a sudden I've looked back and now I've made this one decision for 20 years. Now this is going to take a little bit of work to unwind. I'm not just going to be able to flip the switch on that. I'm going to have to be really intentional about doing that, right? And I think that's where a lot of that pause comes in, where people are, no, this is just what I do, and it's like, well, that's what you've done. That doesn't mean that's what you do or what you need to do going forward, right? That may be what you've done, and so I totally agree with you. I think the pause and a lot of that self-evaluation, and most of it is just awareness, and that's why I really love the devices. It's just awareness. All of it is about turning on a little more light in a dark room. Just to be aware.
Yeah, and I think if you don't turn on the light, you're going to trip over the mess. So wouldn't you rather see the rubbish that you've left lying around, have a tidy up, and get going sort of from a stronger point? Nick, there's so many things we can talk about, and I think another show would be a really exciting thing to do because I've
Yeah.
got a million questions. One of the burning questions I have, because I teach sophrology, I'm a psychologist by trade, my background is business consultancy. I see the effects of meditation massively on people's Whoop and Aura scores, and when they get it, of course, you have to get them to do it, which is always quite challenging.
Yep.
Um, can I just ask you what's been the most interesting thing or what you see on the data, or what's your sort of top? You shared the seatbelt, but any other meditation tips or the sort of protective benefits of that engaging in yourself or a higher power?
Definitely. I think if I'm going to look at what HRV looks at in particular, right, it is the body's way of communicating how it's adapting to stress or strain. I think if I'm viewing stress, your perception of stress has a really big impact on how actually your body deals with stress.
Mm.
And so, stepping back to that lens, um, meditation and mindfulness and being able to pause, I think has shown through plenty of research and data for plenty of years that your perception of how bad is this, right? That sort of tends to change. And so what we actually see is in the body then you process things differently. Your body processes things differently. If you're convinced that something is a very terrible, terrible thing, your body's going to process it as such. And if you have the ability to really think about it differently, it might be the same event or the same stressor or the same event at work, but you're going to be able to process that a little bit differently when you sort of have the ability to kind of step outside yourself and keep an eye on the big picture. And so oversimplification of a lot of the things the benefits that you can get from mindfulness. But I would say, without a doubt, we have seen in our data the mental approach across the spectrum is probably the number one indicator of what turns to people's health around, energy around, all of that. Right? We know that sleep and recovery are a very important thing to look at, to measure, to have an effectiveness of how my body is recovering. If I don't value sleep, then it's completely irrelevant. And so even my mindset around that affects it, right? If my mindset around nutrition is I just have to check a box, so I just have to get whatever's quickly get this over with, then that's going to be a very different thing. And so the mindfulness piece of it is interesting because to me, it goes hand in hand with mindset. And when those two things come together, though they can be applied in fitness, in sleep, in nutrition, in hydration, in all of those different areas for where it can sit. And I would say specifically on the business side, um, I think business professionals need to think about themselves as corporate athletes. I think that they are performance. I think that they need to lead. I think that they are in a locker room. I think that their similarities are almost one-to-one across the board. And I think that it would be there would be very, very few professional athletes that just run around all day, then run onto the pitch to go play a game of soccer or football. It just doesn't happen, right? It doesn't happen because A, they wouldn't make it to the highest levels, and they wouldn't be able to perform. And the second thing is it affects everybody around them. So one thing that I've seen from a mindfulness approach in the business world is the ability to have that connection and empathy with those you are leading. I think that is a very, very large one that if you can get yourself a little bit more comfortable in space in your own skin, then how you show up affects everybody else. And if I'm running a business and I can be the rising tide that lifts all boats, that's going to make a massive in difference in the bottom line of the business. Which then obviously kind of cascades everywhere.
We've neatly segued into collective global consciousness, conscious organizations, and leaders cast shadows, which we haven't got time to discuss today, but I can't agree with you more. If you're leading people, you've got a duty of care to yourself to be modeling this behavior, which is very healthy. I'd also love at some point to discuss the fact that academics and children are academic athletes. They should be training for exams and academics in the same way that you've described executives and athletes train. And I'm not seeing that being terribly widespread just yet.
I would 100% agree. I think that, when I was on Stanford's campus, it was silly. I used to always joke that I don't think Stanford could graduate from Stanford. I mean, it was a wonderful place, and everybody there has a palpable sense of everybody here is doing great. They're doing amazing, amazing work, and they're doing it by putting themselves between a rock and a hard place to start. And if we could just allow them the space to flourish, like who knows what could happen, right? And there isn't a single person that has come through our program that I have worked with that has not thought, man, I wish that I would have gotten to this sooner. Like I wish I would have gotten to this sooner. And if I filter that all the way down, I just I think, yeah, this is probably a conversation for a different day. I think schooling in general, we need a rematch of a whole bunch of different stuff. We can add healthcare, education, we can throw it all in the pot of like we need a fresh start on a lot of this.
And that's how we raise the global game changers of the future, Nick, of course, by sharing
Sure.
messages. Closing comments, people who would love to know more about your program, work more with you, find out more about how you can support them, their organizations, their teams, their schools, their groups, how best to get hold of you?
Yeah, we the website is coya.life. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn as well. And I'm happy to connect it actually with anybody. Even my email is nick@coya.life. Happy to have a chat about people's their group, themselves, their companies, whatever the case might be. Even if it's just a conversation like this that doesn't have to turn into anything official. This is just a subject matter that I'm incredibly passionate about, and like you, I feel like if we can affect one person, then it's probably all worth it. And who knows, if we can get to 10 people, then man, we really got something going. So I'm happy to have any conversation with anybody about this. And I really appreciate getting the time to chat with you about it.
Amazing. It's been an absolute pleasure, Nick. Thank you so much for your time today.
Of course.